All right, well, welcome everybody. This is, I believe it's our first Science from Your Sofa webinar this year in 2022. Welcome back to our online series. I'm Amy Liebman, President of NTM Info and Research. I'll be the moderator for today's session. Today, we're very pleased to welcome Peter Small and Reid Moorsmith from Hyfe. Reid Moorsmith has over 15 years of experience working in global public health using ethnography to translate consumer needs and desires into appealing health offerings that meet people where they are. Working for Population Services International, Reid helped develop markets for health products and fast-moving consumer goods in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Reid joined Hyfe full-time in October 2021 to lead the consumer-facing business of apps and wearables. Dr. Peter Small has had an eclectic career, with the common theme being cough, something we're all familiar with, both as a tuberculosis expert and as a person with a chronic cough. He was chief medical resident at UCSF during the dawn of the HIV epidemic, did pioneering molecular epidemiologic research at Stanford University, built and ran the TB program for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and founded the Global Health Institute at Stony Brook University. 6 months ago, he joined Hyfe as Chief Medical Officer, where he oversees the medical aspects of Hyfe's goal to improve the way the world manages cough. Welcome, gentlemen. Few notes and announcements. Most of you are familiar with the Q&A function, so here's a picture of it. If you have a question, drop it into the Q&A. You type it in, you hit send, it'll pop up into the Q&A. And when we get to the Q&A section, and there are going to be several points along the way where we're answering questions, I'll read out the questions for the presenters to answer. We'd like to thank Insmed for supporting our work. Without the support of companies like Insmed and of people like you, we could not continue to bring this wonderful online programming. It's been a pleasure to do so, and we're very pleased to be able to continue to bring programming to you this year. Don't forget to find us online. You can follow us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And you can also learn more and sign up for the latest news at ntminfo.org. We have a regular monthly newsletter. You can also catch up on all of our past webinars at YouTube. There's our YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/NTMIR. Our upcoming webinar, our rescheduled webinar with Dr. Devin Smith, Improving Your Wellbeing with Effective Communication and Social Support, on Tuesday, February 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern. And we're very excited to have that webinar coming to you. So I think we're ready. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today. We're very excited to learn more about what Hyfe is working on, and we're very excited to learn more about cough. We understand you have some really good information for us, and thank you for joining us today. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Amy and Helga. It's actually a real pleasure to be here. I love this concept of science from the sofa. I wish that had been around when I was doing my postdoc. As you've heard, Reid and I are from Hyfe. It's a small company comprised of clinicians, data scientists, app developers who are passionate about cough. I mean, we think that cough it's amazing. It's often annoying. It's almost always underappreciated. And it's a funny phenomenon in that it's common. Cough's one of the most common reasons that people seek medical care. About 5% of Americans have a refractory chronic cough that's not related to infections. But cough is also, it's sort of a strange thing. It cuts both ways. Cough is protective. If you had no cough, you may well die of aspiration pneumonia. On the other hand, if you're coughing a lot, you may be in the process of dying from aspiration pneumonia. It's also funny duality in that it is a symptom that a patient reports, as well as a sign that a health provider can observe. And yet those two data streams rarely align. Our goal today is to help you understand this phenomena and to solicit your help in improving our mobile phone app, which is a tool that we think can help you to better understand your own cough. Next. Next slide. We're going to present today's webinar in 3 short chapters. I'll begin by explaining a bit about cough, both the anatomy and the physiology, the form and the function of a cough. And then I'll talk a little bit about how it can be measured and turn things over to Reid, who will talk about how you can interact with our technology. Next slide. But first, I want to introduce you to our chief scientist, Dr. Carlos Shakur, and show you a video of the back of his throat. As you can see on the right panel, Carlos recently underwent laryngoscopy, a procedure in which an ENT doctor passes a small camera through his nose into the back of his throat in order to help us better understand and explain cough. I'm going to start this video on the next slide. I just want to give you a warning. Some of you may find the video a little bit graphic. I personally, as both a doctor and a cougher, find it really fascinating to see what happens when I'm actually coughing. Next slide. So this is the video of the back of Carlos's throat when he's coughing. Next slide. So what you've seen here is this amazing, can you go on to the next slide? Click, there we go, yeah. It's really an amazingly complicated interaction of structures and function of anatomy and physiology. And in this figure, you can see the structure labeled with the trachea, the windpipe, towards the front of the neck, the esophagus, the food pipe, behind it, and the voice box or larynx labeled. And I particularly want to call your attention to the vocal cords, which are small white structures which vibrate for speaking and close together when you cough. And then towards the head is the epiglottis, which is a flapper valve that essentially comes down to close off the trachea when you're swallowing. Next slide. A cough's fundamentally just a forced expulsion of air, and it occurs in 4 phases. It begins with irritation, and the irritation can come in 2 forms. One is if you tickle the upper airways, you get a very strong urge to cough. If you've ever, when water goes down the wrong pipe, that's a cough you cannot suppress. There are other cough receptors deeper in the lungs, which are more that cough of like, oh, I should really cough, but I'm not going to do it till I get outside, kind of an irritation. But whatever form of irritation becomes, the next phase is inspiration. Once you've triggered a cough, there's a reflex in which the vocal cords separate, air comes into the lungs. Then this 3rd phase is compression. The vocal cords close, the pressure builds up, and then those cords open, and there's this rapid expulsion of air. And the wind speeds right there around the vocal cords can reach nearly 100 miles an hour. Next slide. This reflex is coordinated by a neurologic pathway that starts with the receptors that I described either in the airways or more diffusely in the lung, goes up to the brain stem. There, information comes down from the brain. That's why we can cough at will, but you can't make yourself sneeze at will. And that then gets integrated. And when a cough is initiated, there's a motor neurons that motor nerves that will close and open the larynx and contract and relax the muscles. So now let's go back forward, Reid, to the next slide and take another look at Carlos's coughing. And now just to orient you here, we are now looking like straight down his trachea. This is the front of his neck and the back of his neck. Towards the front of his neck, which is where his Adam's apple is, you can see these two white structures, which are the vocal cords. And behind that, the epiglottis, which in this view is covering the esophagus. So with these structures in mind, let's now take a look at how things open and close during Carlos's cough. It's really a pretty phenomenal set of events that are occurring here, and I for one find it helpful to understand a little bit about what's going on when I'm coughing. Next slide. And perhaps we could pause here for a second and see if anyone has any questions. I don't know, Amy, if any have come in yet.
So yeah, there are a couple of them. We actually had somebody email in a couple of questions earlier, and one of them I think directly relates. So one of the questions they sent in was, does the body need to cough? And it sounded like what you were saying before was yes. Otherwise we would end up with pneumonia. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Does it have to do with the fact that we're always that our bodies just constantly produce mucus naturally anyway?
Yeah, well, you know, it's a natural protective mechanism, and in two ways. All day long, the cilia in your trachea are moving a flow of water and mucus up and out of your lungs, carrying with it any particles that happen to land there. And if that gets kind of hung up at the larynx, then coughing will clear it out. So there's just a normal, everyone coughs probably on the order of 10, 20 times a day. Then there's the protective cough, which is like, oh, I was drinking water, it went down the wrong pipe. And that's another very important protective mechanism. But there are pathologic reflexes, such as my refractory chronic cough, where it's almost like chronic pain. It gets overstimulated, and I'm coughing for no reason. I'm feeling this urge. I'm coughing. It's doing me no good. So it cuts both ways. It's really helpful and really annoying.
So we have a few questions now in the Q&A as well. Somebody's asking, how do I cough up mucus without causing more damage to my weakened pelvic floor muscles? Yeah,
well, unfortunately, you are not alone. And one of the problems with chronic coughing is stress incontinence. And you know, I'm neither a cough control expert, but I do know that there are physical therapists who do behavioral cough therapy that can help give you tricks for suppressing coughs and minimizing the force of a cough. And I'm not a urogynecologist either, so I don't know about, you know, what can be done to strengthen pelvic floor muscles. But I just to say that unfortunately that's a situation that many women in particular face.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it when I saw that question come in. You know, I don't think we talk enough about those kinds of things that are a result of cough, and I have a feeling this might end up being a a good webinar topic for the future, because I think a lot more of us deal with that than people realize. I would encourage you to talk to your doctor, in particular your gynecologist. There are exercises you can do to help strengthen your pelvic floor, and there are new devices that are coming onto the market. Some of them are FDA approved as well, that can also help with strengthening the pelvic floor muscles. So I would definitely encourage you to talk to your doctor as well. Next question, what role does a cough play in a collapsed lung? For example, why do I cough constantly when I have a collapsed right middle lobe?
Well, the receptors that initiate the urge to cough in the lungs are probably getting stimulated by physical tugging, as well as particles landing on them, and then sometimes from chemicals in the air and whatnot. So it's just one of many stimuli that initiate this urge that results in coughing.
Okay, next question. Should we avoid the urge to clear our throat? Does it cause inflammation?
No, there's nothing that I know of that suggests that clearing your throat causes irritation to anyone but one's spouse.
Does coughing irritate the lungs? Does the power or strength of the cough affect the irritation?
For many people, it's a very important protective mechanism, but it can cross over the line where it just becomes a self-perpetuating reflex. And that's where interventions, can help to break that cycle. So yes, it can, but not always. Again, I would talk with your physicians about these questions, because the general answers tend to be, yeah, sort of. That's cough in general, pulmonary in general, maybe. And it's really, a lot of this is going to depend on your own personal situation that probably you and your physician have far more insight into.
Thank you. So here's another question. I had an MRI. I had to cough, but after a few minutes, they stopped the MRI so I could cough, probably because when they do those scans, you're supposed to lay very still. I'm very fidgety, so that never works out. Does that happen because of the NTM and bronchiectasis when they lay flat? Would that contribute to like sort of an increased, urge to cough, and then like the laying flat would then increase the urge to cough?
It could. It certainly could. Pooling of secretions can do that. This is a very specialized audience, as I understand, with many people who have NTM. But if you are a primary care doctor sitting in a general medicine clinic, as I did once in my life, when people come in with a cough, the vast majority have a viral URI and it'll go away in a few weeks. There's a large number of them who have cough. The most common cause is gastroesophageal reflux. So those people tend to lay flat after a big meal and cough. Asthma and postnasal drip. And sometimes those people also, when they lay down, their sinuses drain and they cough more. So again, lots of different possibilities here, and hard to say in any specific case without far more information.
So we have a couple of questions about cough and vocal cords. They're asking about whether it damages the vocal fold, and is there a way to reduce the stress and irritation on the vocal cords?
Well, your vocal cords have evolved in part to help you cough. So, some coughing is certainly not bad. I think many of us have had episodes where we coughed so much that we're hoarse, and that is probably a reflection of inflammation. But in general, and again, just speaking at a very high level, chronic inflammation of the vocal cords from coughing, and certainly damage persistent damage as a result of that is unlikely. But if you're finding that you're coughing a lot and you're hoarse, that's a perfect issue to bring up with your providers.
Okay, there's one question here that I think we're gonna wait until after the next section of the presentation. So I think we'll do one more question and then we'll move on, but we will get to the questions eventually. I just want to let everybody know, but there's more presentations. So, with their diagnosis of NTM, even when they do airway clearance, they experience unpredictable coughing, especially at night. Can you think of anything that can be done to, to help prevent this or to help mitigate it?
There are so many reasons that people might be coughing at night when they're laying down, and certainly their NTM could be part of it. But as I said, that just because you have NTM doesn't mean you can't have these other conditions. So, to see your provider, to raise these issues and to ask if other causes should be explored or therapies tried. And we'll talk about this in the next section. There's no diagnostic test for cough. It's super frustrating. It's not like you can do a blood test and say, oh, that's from your NTM, or oh, that's from, reflux. And so, what providers tend to do is to do an empiric trial. They'll say, well, why don't you take some Pepcid for a month and see if your cough at night gets a little better. And part of what we're hoping to do, and what we'll talk about in the next section, is to allow you to actually see what happens when you make a change, so that you yourself are better informed about, well, when do you cough at night? Is it after eating a big meal, or is it every night? So, I think, but again, one common medical mistake is called premature closure. It's you see a patient who has one condition and you assume that that's the cause of all the problems. And so it's worth stepping back occasionally and saying, like, is there are there other things going on here that might contribute to this new or changing part of my cough?
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to let you move on to the next section of the presentation. I know we've got at least one more Q&A section after that.
Yes, we'll do a Q&A shortly after this, and then after Reid presents as well. So, so when I'm asked to describe how the medical system currently measures and discusses cough in one word, there's only one word that comes to my mind, and that is pathetically. And Hyph was founded on the belief that this no longer needs to be the case. It no longer needs to be the scenario, which I know well, having been on both sides of this, the bed, as they say. The doctor says, well, how much are you coughing? And I'll be honest with you, as a patient, my initial response, though I'm usually too polite to blurt it out, is, I don't know, doc. How many times did you cough yesterday? You don't know, I don't know, none of us know. And so we tend to take, a complicated pattern of cough and reduce it to a phrase like, oh, a lot, or it's a little better. And next slide. And some of you may have seen an interesting article in the September Wall Street Journal that was about the future of cough, and it featured Hyph's ability to unobtrusively monitor cough while at the same time ensuring privacy. Essentially, a Fitbit for cough what Fitbit did for steps, and we just feel that cough is far more consequential than steps, and that the providing people the ability to monitor their own cough has the potential to empower the patients, improve the quality of the healthcare that's being provided, as well as improving the efficiency of the development of the new drugs that are so badly needed for cough. Next slide. I want to take just a couple minutes and talk about how the Hyph cough app works. But before I do that, I want to emphasize that like Fitbit, Hyph is not a medically approved device, and it shouldn't be used for making medical decisions. It's like the fitness app in that it can be used for improving your own fitness, but we are not an FDA approved medical device yet. What we are is an app that you can download onto an Android or an Apple phone. It's freely available from our website. And what happens when you have this running on your phone is that it is constantly monitoring sound levels. So it's not listening, right? It's like that dial on your high fidelity stereo back when houses had hi-fi and not Wi-Fi, I guess. But you know that just a little indicator that would, when there's a loud sound, it would go bang over to the side and back into the red zone and back. And that's all we do. We just listen to the sound. And when we get a explosive sound, it records a half a second snippet and sends that to our computers in the cloud. And a half a second is, it's enough information for us to determine if you've coughed or not. But there's not enough information for us to know anything about you or your medical condition or what you happen to be doing or who you're talking with or what you're up to. But what we do is we then, in our computer system, run that half-second snippet of sound through what's called an artificial intelligence machine learning algorithm. And this is just computer magic that I don't understand. But basically, because we have over 165 million cough-like sounds, and because we've listened to over 1 million of those and determined which are coughs, we were able to train this algorithm to distinguish between a cough and a non-cough. And then that information gets sent back and reported on a graph. And you can see on your app the number of coughs that day or over the last week or month or whatever. And you can also hear the sound of each individual cough. Next slide. So here, for example, is my cough for a couple of weeks in September. You can see here that these are the days of the month, so September 1st to, I don't know, maybe the 17th. And on the y-axis are the number of coughs per day. On a good day, I cough as few as 10 times. On a bad day, over 80 times. And what's really interesting to me, particularly in the context of COVID and the increased stigmatization, you know, I used to cough in the grocery store and people kind of look over and go, God bless you, thinking I'd sneeze. Now they look at me like I pulled out an Uzi submachine gun, and if there's a word God, it's not followed by blessings. I mean, so what's striking to me is how much I'm coughing. I really didn't know that there are, you know, weeks where I'm coughing this much. But the other interesting thing that it's allowed me to do is to sort of play around with trying to understand why I'm coughing. I mean, when I eat a lot of spicy food, am I coughing more? This is what I've been playing around with it. And it's kind of cool because you can go to any given day and click through in the app. And so, for example, here's September 3rd, and you can see the first cough was my cough at 9:05 a.m. You push the button, you hear that half-second snippet, and you go like, oh yeah, that was definitely a cough. And so next slide. So that's really, you know, the technology that we've developed. We've been around for about 1.5 years, and I joined just 6 months ago. And you know, as the chief medical officer of the company, I really just wanted to emphasize that we're really a science-first company. You know, two of our founders are former public health people. You know, I worked at the Gates Foundation, and our ambition as a company is nothing short of transforming the way the world manages cough. And and not just cough from NTM. This, you can see here that we have more than 20 studies ongoing around the world with 9 different diseases, bronchiectasis and NTM in Denver and Portland, but congestive heart failure, COVID, tuberculosis, refractory chronic cough, pediatric cough. We're even doing dog coughs in Japan. And really, our hope is that these studies will provide insights and interventions that can dramatically improve the management of the cough that you and others have. And I'll pause there and take any questions about the app itself.
Okay, let's see what questions we have about the app, and then we can move on. And there are other questions about other. Can the Hyph app break out wheezing or presence of rails?
No, we don't. So what we're based on this vision that non-contact sounds, so it's not a microphone that you strap to your chest wall, that they are so ubiquitous, as are mobile phones, that will be able to track cough. And we think cough is a really significant issue. We have not gotten involved with listening for other sounds like sneezing, wheezing, laughing. We're just a bunch of cough nerds.
Okay. Can the app determine your cough that occurs when you're actively using your vest airway clearance machine? Is the technology able to hear that cough sound over the cough of the air generator of the vest machine, I guess?
No idea. We'd love to find out. I mean, if that was something that would make a difference, and Reid will talk about this, is, we want to build something that works and helps people. And if that's a common question and concern, then shoot us an email and let's see, let's figure it out together.
Okay. Does the app identify if normal or baseline cough has decreased over time?
So, it's really interesting. I don't know what a normal cough is.
That's fair.
It's what we're
I guess
learning.
Baseline is the more appropriate term.
Yeah. So that's super interesting. That's a really good question, and one that I honestly hadn't anticipated. Coughers have good days and bad days, and some people cough more in the morning, some in the evening, and so trying to figure out if you're getting better or worse can be complicated, because you saw my cough, and if I cough 60 times tomorrow, that's within my range of normal. Reid, I don't think coughs much, and if he coughs 60 times tomorrow, that's abnormal. So one of the research projects that we're working on is to develop individual statistical models. And I could go deep into this and negative binomial distributions and other things, but I won't. Just to say that by tracking my cough for a few weeks, we built a model that says, well, Peter coughs about this much. So if he goes higher than that, way higher than that on one day, that's probably significant. If it goes a little higher than that on 3 days, that's probably significant. But within that range, that's his baseline. So right now we don't do this, but my guess is that if you use the app, you'll look and you'll quickly come to understand that intuitively what your own baseline is, and be able to see that it's deviating. But we've not yet rigorously sorted out the statistics, nor have we done any of the clinical research that is needed for anyone to be making medical decisions based on that.
So because this is machine learning, it's AI based, it needs your data over time in order to form that picture, basically.
Yeah, it's sort of why you like going back to see the same doctor, because they kind of know you, and your cough is no different. We hope that we can train the app so that it knows you and your cough, but we're not there yet.
Okay. The next question, here's a good question. Is the app just for users in the US or is it worldwide?
It's worldwide. In fact, we put an app out freely available on both Apple and Android about almost a year and a half ago. And it wasn't the best app in the world, I'll be honest. We've improved it dramatically since then. But we have users around the world, and we have the world's biggest collection of cough sounds, that we're using to improve our app. Because one of the challenges of artificial intelligence is if you just train it on a very biased sample, then it will only work in that population. So by incorporating coughs from around the world with lots of different cell phones and lots of different background noise, we think we've developed a very robust product, which one day we would love to see this, just part of routine healthcare. Anyone who has a cell phone in Africa can use this to stay on top of their coughing.
So on that vein, somebody's asking a question. Recognizing data is needed over time with enough people to anonymize. If we track our cough, will we be able to compare against general population or other COPD or NTM bronchiectasis populations and track our own trends on coughing? So do you think that might be something that the app would evolve to at some point, where the user enters, and I haven't looked at the app, so I don't know if this is already part of the app, but when you sign up, do you enter information about what comorbidities you have that contribute to your cough? Or is that something that could be planned as a rollout for an update in the app, so that you would then know like what kinds of things are contributing to those coughs?
Yeah, I'll let Reid address this in his
Okay.
talk, because we have, what I've been talking about is this free consumer app you can download, and we have a research app. And in the research studies, we collect a lot of information, but we collect it under a strict, consented IRB, and from that we're learning a lot. But we don't collect data on without people knowing it and being part of such processes. But Reid can address that shortly.
Okay, here's another question. Is the inhale that happens automatically just before a cough different than a usual inhale? Is that cough inhale one that tightens the muscles of the larynx?
I'm kind of making this up, so take it with a grain of salt. I believe it's just a regular inhale. And in fact, when you cough, sometimes you'll not have a chance to inhale. You have a little cough, at the end, and you'll get a big deep breath. But the inhalation itself is just the usual sort of physics of inhaling. And when you do inhale, your vocal cords do relax.
And someone's asking, what is the mechanism that some smells trigger a cough? For example, vinegar, a certain scents like perfume or flowers. Is that just that they're irritating the airways?
Yeah, in fact, one of the standard tests used by cough clinicians is I can never say this word right, but it's that capsaicin, I think is the way it's pronounced. It's the red pepper, and inhaling red pepper is a very, very potent stimulus to cough.
Somebody is asking, in the last 7 to 10 years, has the science in the area of coughing, lung clearance, respiratory health, et cetera, has it advanced much in that time? What have you seen?
Yeah, I've been impressed by the progress that's been made in the last 5 years, not on infectious coughs, but in the non-infectious cough, and understanding the pathway. And in fact, there are drugs in development which block this specific receptor for this, what's called refractory chronic cough or unexplained chronic cough. I think in the infectious space, there's been tremendous progress, made with antibiotics, anti-inflammatories, bronchodilators, those combinations. But cough itself, I'm expecting that we're going to see the next 5 years are like a golden era of cough because, these companies have new products that they're testing that could make a big difference. COVID has exacerbated and stigmatized people's concerns about cough. And frankly, I think, the ability to monitor it is gonna make a big difference. It's sort of like, the first time you heard that someone was measuring steps, you're like, well, why would I do that? Now, I can't tell you how many of my friends don't go to bed until their 10,000th step.
Okay. A couple more questions before we move on to the next section. Is the coughing speed of air, which they're saying is, I guess, 100 miles per hour is what they're saying. Is that the fastest airspeed through that area, I guess that area of the body, or are there other things that can cause a high airspeed through that area?
Yeah, no, cough is designed with that in mind. It's really to create that shear force of fast air going by, and that the speed, you take a certain amount, you take the lung volume and you compress it quickly, and its speed is a function of the diameter of what it goes through, and the narrowest point is the larynx.
And why is it when you suppress a cough, the urge gets so much stronger and finally uncontrollable?
Yeah, that's just the way that I have no idea. I mean, but that's certainly been my experience, and I can hold it in maybe till I get to the door, but certainly not for cross-country flight.
Yeah, we don't encourage our patients to hold your cough in. We want you to get that out of your lungs. So,
Yeah.
one question, somebody's asking, what should I say to strangers around me to explain my cough? I think that's a question for other patients to answer. We'd love to see, so you can actually drop your answers right into the Q&A, and maybe at the end of the webinar, we'll read some of that out. But I would like to know what some of the patients say to that. What should I say to strangers around me to explain my cough? So I think we'll move on now with the presentation, and we'll get back to the Q&A after.
Super. Reid, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Great to be talking to all of you. So I'm the Director of Consumer Products, and we hope that at least some of you will become consumers. And so I'm going to first, after Peter told the story a bit about how Hyph got started, I'll talk about what our offerings are now and what we expect in the future. So the first thing to say is, yeah, we have a consumer app. It runs on most smartphones. It's always free to users. You can go to the same place you would download any app and get it, or to our website and click a button. And there you will see your own data and can draw insights from that, as Peter described from his cough. I typically don't have a cough, but like so many people, last month I had COVID, and occasionally, as a part of Hyph, the company, I have tracked my cough. But if you don't cough, if you cough 5 times a day, you're not really going to see that much or learn that much. But the first day I felt really ill, I coughed 120 times. The next day, the one day that I was quite ill, I coughed, 368 times in the 10 hours I was tracking it. So that day I might have coughed 1,000 times, because if you listened to me that night, all I did was cough, and I wasn't tracking it at night. And then it tapered off quickly. And I was really fortunate. I had a very mild case of COVID. And the one thing that has kind of lingered is I have this shallow cough that seems to only be triggered when I talk, which I do for a living. So yeah, I mean, I might cough a few times, and what do I do? I keep a glass of water on my desk, but I have become much more keenly aware of, seeing what the reaction of people around me during the COVID era is during cough in a very small way. So the consumer app is not, as Peter said, it's not an FDA approved medical product. yet. We hope it will be someday, but right now it's used for consumers to track your cough. And then second, we have in development, it's in beta testing, a standalone, a wearable piece of hardware that you can see is like a kind of a button that you pin to clothing. And that can be used for individuals, or it could be, as part of a sensor in an environment to see how much coughing is going on in a public space, for example, to do pandemic alert. And this one has standardized microphone software, on-premise processing, meaning all of the action happens inside that little device and then gets uploaded to a computer later. And we think this is going to be really, really important for researchers who need that kind of standardization to be able to make sure that the data doesn't have biases in it. For us as individuals, we need to be able to mostly be comparing our own data to ourselves. And so we have the same phone, which has the same microphone and the same software in it. So there's not that much variability, but if you did a study, you want people to have, a standardized device. So that's going to be really valuable for that. And then the third product is we have a research platform that researchers use. And for this, they give out dedicated smartphones, again, standardized. Patients can't see the data because we don't want people modifying their behavior in a study, which would introduce bias. And this enables researchers to get extensive insights and objective data on cough in a way that they haven't been before. As Peter was saying, he used the word pathetic. Even in a lot of research studies, researchers rely on what are called patient-reported outcomes to figure out how much people cough, sometimes with cough diaries, but those are not so accurate. And so we think using these three products and others we develop, we're really going to transform the market for cough detection and then eventually cough classification. So it's important to say that our path to growth doesn't rely on users being the product. So I'm not pointing direct fingers, but we all know that there are a lot of big tech companies which offer their product, ostensible product, for free. And they do that because they're collecting data and then selling that data on users to other companies in the form of advertising or in the form of other findings. And so, in effect, the user is the product, and that's not the case for us. The product is, we think, going to be valuable enough that companies that we partner with will pay us for license to use the technology. And those kinds of companies could be telemedicine companies, because you can imagine if you're not in a doctor's office, the doctor wants to know what's going on with a cough or respiratory condition. This could be hugely valuable. Pharma companies, Peter talked about the development of new drugs. We are partnering with pharma companies now in that development pipeline. And then finally, consumer tech companies. Eventually, we think that this technology will be built in to companies that make things like smartwatches and other products that consumers use, so that cough detection will become much more ubiquitous the way other kinds of biomarkers are. So if I asked you what a normal temperature is, it's a little bit of a myth, but we would all know it's 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6. That's a kind of, that's the benchmark. But as was discussed earlier, we have no idea actually for cough. And through growth, through partnership, we think that that we will arrive at a place where cough is much more knowable and known. So this is our promise to consumers, a convenient, accurate cough tracking device. At the moment, this for you would be on a smartphone, that it will always be free to consumers, that we don't sell user data. We do use user data, and this is part of the AI and machine learning that Peter talked about, to constantly improve the product performance. We need more cough and cough-like sounds to be able to ever more accurately say, that's a cough, that's not a cough, and eventually to be able to say, that's a certain kind of cough rather than another kind of cough, and to be able to at least predict, if not diagnose, disease based on cough sounds. Again, we're not there yet. And finally, we actively seek user input to develop features that will enhance the user experience. So yeah, my background is as an anthropologist studying people in health, and I brought that to Hyph to try to figure out, okay, what is going to make this product, this technology, something that is easy to use, that is pleasing to use, that is going to deliver the output that people need. One of the earlier questions was, what kind of analysis is delivered to the user? And right now, for both regulatory and the stage we are at a company reasons, we don't have an extensive output. We think we're going to get there, and we need people who use the product to tell us what they need in order to get there. So I'm going to go through some feedback that we've gotten so far, and they fall into a few different categories. The number one thing we've heard from patients who are satisfied, or I'll say the two things that we've heard from patients who are satisfied using Hyph is, one, they know a lot more about their cough. That means they know when it's happening, how much it's happening, and some triggers. I cough more after I eat X, or cold weather, or seasonally, time of day, and so on. And then the second thing, and this isn't something that we set out to do, but has really emerged from what people are telling us, is patient empowerment through being taken seriously by doctors. So I'll read this long quote from a woman with a very severe chronic cough. She tracked up to 4,000 coughs in a day. She said, I literally saw that blank expression from a GP, and I said, listen, you've got to do something about this cough. Bear in mind that he has listened to me complain about this incessantly for over 4 years. I don't think you really understand. Look, there's a spike. I need help because I can't sleep. I can't eat. And all of a sudden, the behavioral change in the doctor that occurred just presenting him with the actual statistical data from the app, it just changed his whole behavior. I think it was night and day. I cannot articulate the complete difference. So we've heard this from quite a few people, and this is particularly the case for people with refractory chronic cough, or cough with no known cause, because they struggle without getting that diagnosis. But I think it also affects people who have a diagnosis, sometimes not being taken quite seriously, and providers not really grasping how disruptive persistent cough can be. Next, we've learned that people just don't know how much they're coughing and whether it's increasing or decreasing, except at the extremes. Like for me, my 5 coughs a day going to hundreds of coughs, of course I know that. But people who cough within a range like Peter does, could be a much higher range, don't know whether it's going off and on. And this is a user just told me this the other day. I tried Hyph and I was shocked at how many times I coughed per hour. I was also surprised that one of my spells was 27 coughs. I was impressed and now have an appointment with a primary care physician. Another form of feedback we've gotten is from physicians, and this is from a pulmonologist. A lot of physicians, not all, but a lot of physicians really think this could be a game changer because they're going to be able to tell what's really going on in more than that 15-minute slice when they get to see patients in the office. And he said, because when we assess subjectively, we may make some vague description of severity, frequency, or problems, meaning subjectively assess cough. As I told you, seeing is believing. I'm sure when we start to use objective cough monitoring, we will be able to understand the problem more clearly and more deeply. One of the things we've also heard is that people have some trouble downloading and onboarding. This is particularly true for less tech-savvy users, people who are not in the habit of downloading and changing apps all the time. And we've made some changes to simplify the process, but we really need input on this, but also on lots of other aspects of the app. And this brings me to the request we have for this group. Many of you struggle with cough. And what we'd like to ask are 3 things. So the first is we'd love for you to try out the app, which you can download, find those buttons that you see everywhere on websites on the phone, on our website or just by going to the Apple Store, the iOS App Store, or the Google Play Store. Download and try the app. We'd love for you to try it. And second, we'd be delighted to hear what's your experience. Is it easy, hard to download, access, use? What surprises, pleases, or displeases you? And we really need to know what you would change or add to make it better. What do you need to see? What do you need to touch? What do you need to sense or feel in order for it to be a useful and satisfying experience? And then finally, and this is the slightly bigger ask, if there are a few of you who would be willing to be what we call panelists, whom we can turn to periodically to get more in-depth guidance from people who need to know more about their cough, we'd love to kind of sign you up. And we're not talking about, me coming to your house for dinner every Tuesday night. We're talking about, maybe 4 times a year, quarterly, reaching out to you and running some ideas by you about new features that might be in development, or to just get input on how things are going and what changes you'd like to see. I think Amy will send a follow-up email with our information for those who'd like to get in touch and either learn more about Hyph if you didn't get a chance to get your question answered, or to become a panelist and give us more extensive feedback. And I will stop there and thank you all so much, and ask if there are any questions you have that you would like answered.
Thank you. Yes, there are a bunch of questions, so I will start going through those. There are a couple of people who've already dropped into the Q&A that they would like to be panelists. Go ahead and email me directly at amy@ntminfo.org so that I have your contact information. And just note that I have your permission to forward your name and email address to the team at Hyph so they can get in touch with you. And I will make sure to forward that on. So that's already underway. And if you'd like to cook them dinner every once in a while, I don't think they'll say no, but okay, let's start with the questions. Would the cough app recognize a coughing fit or coughing that continues for several minutes? So I guess a prolonged coughing spell. Would that register differently, I guess, is a good way to.
So as Peter said, like that stereo gauge, the algorithm, the machine is listening for loud disruptive sounds, and it then records that half-second interval. So if I go, that would be four, I think, different sounds that would be recorded as cough-like sounds, and then there would be analyzed, and they would come back as 4 distinct coughs. So yes, is the answer to that. Now, is it perfect? No, but it will detect a high proportion of the coughs that you expel, whether they're in rapid sequence or isolated.
Okay, thank you. There are a few people who are interested to sign up as panelists. I'm just typing my email address to them right now. Again, you can email me directly at amy, A-M-Y, @ntminfo.org. Next, and this one, I actually really like this question because I think we're all sick of devices zapping and gronking at us all the time. So will the app constantly send messages? I would only want to see the data about my cough when I request it.
We sort of have an approach that is minimally invasive. Right now, we send almost no messages. I mean, we've sent a few pop-ups over the course of a year and a half. We're in the process of trying to figure out how to engage better with our users without becoming pests. And so that's actually something that the panelists can help with. So there may be an occasional pop-up, but there's no sounds, there's no alarms, there's none of that. And there may be an occasional email, which you can discard or read and reply to as you see fit. But no, this is not the kind of app that's going to, it's not like, I don't know if any of you use Waze to help drive around, but I find Waze to be alarming because it's always buzzing and beeping at me, and I don't know why. So we don't do that.
But also just to add that, we're in uncharted territory here, and in fact, I thought I wanted to know what my cough was doing every day. And because my cough goes up and down so much without it really having any significance, it was driving me crazy. I was getting because we did have this feature on our, beta
Good point.
version. And this is where the feedback's super helpful because as a user, I initially thought like I'd like to know every day, and I quickly realized like no, I only want to know when there's really something going on, which spawned this whole line of research about how do you know cough, which is a complicated statistical question, is getting better or worse. But yeah, feedback on these kinds of interface issues is super appreciated.
Okay, and here's another good question. What about those of us who are more throat clearers who have NTM and bronchiectasis? Does it pick up on throat clearing and differentiate it?
Peter?
Yeah. So we've been doing, under strict IRB, some evaluation of the product, which includes, having people listening, going like, was that a cough or was that a throat clear or was that a sneeze? And we now have a 30-page document that trains our annotators of what's a cough, what's a throat clear, what's a sneeze, what's something weird. And it turns out throat clearing is going to be a problem for us because it's the exact, in fact, that's one of the reasons we could show you the video of Carlos's larynx when he was clearing his throat, but that was part of the impetus for that. At this point, we don't know the answer. But again, this is where we're constantly learning. We don't know whether a throat clear will be counted as a cough or not. And not all throat clearers are the same. Some people go and others go, we don't know. And let me be really, really transparent. We're not perfect, and it's the same way that the Fitbit, gets you crazy results if you're, down in your basement building shelves or something. We're going to be imprecise, and our current highest priority is trying to figure out exactly how precise we are. And some of the feedback that we'd like to get is how accurate do we have to be helpful?
Yeah, I can just add to that my personal record for steps was on top of a horse crossing a few mountain passes in Kyrgyzstan when I wasn't doing any of the walking.
Okay, yeah, that's what happens. Yeah. If you cover your cough, does the app hear it? So I guess that's a good question because a lot of us are now doing the sort of the elbow over the mouth to cough into your cubital.
We don't think that the use of a face mask makes a difference. Again, I don't, and I don't think will make a difference. But if you're, yeah, maybe. Again, a lot. We're in the early days.
Yeah, and again, we encourage our patients not to stifle their cough. We want you to get your cough out if you need to. So,
I think if you think coughs we're going to catch.
Yeah, if you think about like the clearest cough that stands by itself, we'd be near perfect on that one. And then as you get farther from that, and I see one of the questions is how close does the phone need to be? As the microphone gets a certain distance or is in a pocket or is especially in a purse, then it becomes a little more distant. And if it's more muffled or more silenced, that's a little harder to tell. So the clearest cough will have the highest percentage, near perfect percentage, and then it diminishes as coughs get more distant, more muffled, and with enough background noise, more sort of disrupted acoustically. So very high accuracy at arm's length with the phone out, and decreasing, but we think still useful and valuable as some real world conditions come into play. And we are studying actively, where the line is, where we either have to get better or we have to say, here are the instructions. It has to be within a certain distance or with a certain volume.
And here's an interesting question. Can the app tell coughs apart from different people? And I think that would be important. Like, for example, if at some point in the future we get back to like in-person conferences and we have, you know, a bunch of patients in a room together, there's going to be a bunch of people in the room together and they're going to be coughing at various points.
At this point, it does not. We think that it will primarily record the user just because of proximity and the decrease in cough across the room. We are working on some algorithms that may be able to distinguish coughs from different people. I mean, not like the facial recognition creepy stuff, but just to say like, okay, if there are two people living in the same house, can you separate them in their coughs? But at this point, I would say that its value will be diminished if you are in the context of other people who are constantly coughing. And you know, I think most people are not. But
not on a constant basis anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are some questions about differentiating between cough and other sounds like speaking or environmental noises. So it can differentiate those sounds.
Yes.
And what about if somebody's like doing airway clearance? You know, a lot of times when they're doing airway clearance, they have to expectorate. Would it differentiate those sounds?
It's a good question. Actually, it's one of the questions that we're researching with Dave Griffith and Chuck Daly in Denver.
Okay, great. So this question, I think we had talked about this before, comparing against general population and other COPD or NTM bronchiectasis populations and tracking our own trends on coughing. So you can see your own trends over time as you're looking at it. But do you think this is something you'll look at, you know, at some point in the future as you gather enough data on, like, do you think at some point you'll be incorporating, you know, a function where people can make notes on their own health conditions that are contributing?
Well, people can certainly use the app. Well, there are features that have come and gone over time, but we have experimented with the ability for people to put little notes that they keep themselves. We don't see those. The other is we've been experimenting with sharing your cough. So, you know, my father lives in a residential community chronic care facility. And so, you know, for a while, I was able to track his cough on my app, which is a feature that we can have, but we're not sure whether people use it. I found it helpful in the early COVID days, but have stopped using it.
Would there be insights linking cough metrics to the PFT, to their PFT results?
There's been some interesting research studies about the relationship between cough and PFTs that suggest there's not a strict relationship, but they really are measuring different things. So I suspect not, but that's my guess. I'm not speaking as from any data there, just my intuition.
So somebody is looking at they said the comment and response on the App Store says Apple privacy constraints on the mic access make it impossible to run in the background. If you keep Hyph open all day, will it continuously track? And if it's not open all day, I guess. So how does it track then? Do you just open it and then, you know, close it and have it running in the background?
Yeah. So yeah,
instead of closing
that's exactly right. You know, and there's a battle ongoing in your phone for control of your microphone and speakers, so that when you say, "Hey Siri," it trumps everything. And so that's all part of the product development they're working on. So with the Apple version, you'll get a little blurb that says, you know, your app has been shut down. Do you want to restart it? And so with that, you do have to often restart it during the day.
Yeah, if you get a call and you're speaking into the microphone, then yeah, you can't also be tracking the cough because the microphone is then being prioritized for speaking. And so it's really different in the way Android and Apple iOS handle that prioritization. It's much easier for it to run in the background of an Android phone. It's just the way Apple does things, that they don't really want to relinquish that much control to an external party, even though, yeah, I mean, smartphones are only as valuable as the apps that are in them now. But yeah, so as Peter said, it's a development challenge that we are working on. But if you have an iPhone, like I do, yeah, I mean, occasionally when it gets interrupted, yeah, you'll have to restart the cough tracking, and yeah, that's the life we live right now.
Does the app run on Apple Watch?
No.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Is that something that's maybe in the works?
We don't know. I mean, it's we think at some point, yes, if we are successful, as we really think we're going to be, there would be no hardware manufacturer that has lots of customers that wouldn't want this in it. I mean, think about all of the things that are now built into a smartwatch that 5 years ago would have been unimaginable. So it's easy for us to foresee, but it's not actively in the works.
Does it run on an iPad?
No.
Could that be maybe done as well? That might actually solve some of the problem with it, with the microphone issue on the iPhone.
Good, except people don't typically carry iPads around with them. Or maybe
Not
they
all the
do, I
time.
don't know. It's certainly something that we'd love to talk to people who think that could be a solution for them. Yeah, there's no particular reason why it couldn't. It runs on a very similar version of the operating system as the iPhone.
How much does the app drain your phone battery if you leave it running all the time?
So that depends on the phone and how efficient it is. So there is a drain on the battery. When people track their cough overnight, we do recommend that you plug your phone in and leave it charging. Earlier versions of the app were more energy intensive, and we are actively working to make it more efficient. It is an issue. There will be some draining of the battery. I think it's manageable if you charge your phone several times in the day, but it is like any app that is actively, using input and output, going to exert some toll on battery life.
If they have the ringer turned off, will the microphone still record their cough sound?
Yes.
Okay. Does the app include some way to note blood if they're coughing up blood and quantity, et cetera, and their sputum as a result of prolonged hard coughing? Or would they be able to, if there's something like maybe if they're looking at their coughing results that have been tracked and they see that there's like a particularly prolonged hard coughing spell that was noted, could they make notes in there that they coughed up blood, like associated with that particular data point?
So we've been working on a diary feature, and there's been a prototype for the Android version, not for the iPhone yet, but it is something that we are actively working to build in because, yeah, we've been asked by a few users to have that built in. So right now, the answer is mostly no, but we expect that in the future.
So I think that's actually important. We have a few comments in the Q&A that I think are probably going to be helpful. Somebody's saying that they think that knowing the degree of wheezing or rales associated in the sound of the cough helps with management of their pulmonary disease. She says that her mother can always tell over the phone when her level of inflammation in her lungs is up because of the sound, not the quantity of the cough. Which is very interesting to note. And maybe it may be that because this is an AI-based program, that it's something that over time, as it gathers more data from a particular person, it learns to distinguish when that cough quality is different for that person.
Yeah, super interesting observation that this patient has made, and that I would say I would totally agree. I mean, the challenge of training artificial intelligence is having data and upon which to and that knowing that the data is accurate. That's why, having listened to over 1 million sounds to train this, just to tell a cough from background noise, it'll probably take us a while till we get to the point where we can say, oh, that's inflammatory or that's infectious. Is it gurgling more and therefore you should use more antibiotics, or is it wheezing more, you should use more bronchodilators? This would be fantastic, but we're way from that. But there's no theoretical reason not to get there eventually.
Yeah, and hopefully that diary feature will help with that as well.
Yeah.
Another couple of observations from people. For those of us with cranky sinuses, and I feel seen today, tracking nose blowing would be useful. Yes, actually, I would agree with that. And somebody else is agreeing that the depth, severity, length, raspiness, and being able to note their inflammation level, all things that would be useful in terms of tracking. So hopefully, over time, as more data are compiled and the app learns more, it can learn to distinguish those things. Can it distinguish between coughing and clearing of the throat? I believe that would be a yes. Yeah.
We talked about that. It's we can tell white from black, gray gets hard.
Okay. Somebody is saying that when she eats, her throat feels like it's closing up. Since you had addressed the anatomy of the throat before, do you have any insight into that or any possible comments?
No, there are some conditions in which you get, sort of contractions of the throat that cause problems, but that would be something to discuss with her providers.
Yeah, okay. Somebody's commenting that the product would be much more useful if they could have it on their watch, or their smartwatch, because they don't carry their phone around with them all the time, which, yeah, fair enough. I think,
yeah,
hopefully that'll come soon.
We agree and look forward to that day. Good.
Somebody was asking, just to clarify, do we have to wear the button? I'm not sure what button they're referring to.
That's the Hyph prototype. So that's not for it's now being studied, as part of research protocols, but is not available to consumers yet. So the smartphone app is the way to use the product for now.
Okay. Some others. Here, somebody's asking, this might be a psychological thing. Just thinking of a cough can trigger a cough, or it seems like the first reaction is tightening of the throat. Is that a reaction to protect an irritant from entering the airway? Or is it like more of a psychological mechanism? Is it that tightening that can also trigger cough?
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting question. It may be that it's yes and yes. I mean, for sure, cough is something that we can all do volitionally. And it is true that us just talking about cough has probably increased some of our cough a bit, because there's this kind of, your cortex feeds into these neural pathways. And it may be that has some either evolutionary origin or some extreme situations in which, the closing before coughing, certainly this is a bit of a tangent, but this is part of protection against drowning, actually, is that, when water hits your larynx, there's a spasm, and it's why, and it helps to prevent people from aspirating water when they're too close to it.
Okay. What is the difference between your app and other cough trackers?
So I think there's a couple of things that distinguish our approach. So one of the another cough tracker that's actually been on the market for quite a lot longer than we have brags that they used 4,000 coughs to train their algorithm. And as Peter described earlier, there's a kind of a thing that's called the original sin of machine learning or AI, which is that the typical approach is, some smart people invent an algorithm that can detect this or that, or learns this or that, and then they need to get more data into the system. So they walk down the hall of whatever university they're in, and they get a bunch of students who are cut from a very similar demographic cloth, age and other factors. And let's say they coughed into the app a few thousand times, then we would be building a model based on their coughs. And the fact that we did this all in the wild, and we now have, I think we're up to 180 million sounds, means we just have a bigger engine that's powering our machine, and that has more variation built into it. So we're going to get to a better place in terms of accuracy and detection, and we think classification. So yeah, that's really a big distinguishing factor. And then, yeah, the second thing is we've built it in the wild so that we know that it's not perfect, but it works on nightstands, and it works when people are walking around in their day. And we have all of that noise and distraction and variability built into the detection, so that we're solving those problems as we go, rather than building it in a lab and having it only work under perfect laboratory conditions. Those are probably the biggest differences that I would cite.
Okay. Speaking of, somebody's asking, speaking of sleeping, how close does your phone need to be when sleeping? So you'd mentioned the nightstand.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
I mean, most people when they sleep are sleeping in a pretty quiet room, so there's not that much sound distraction. So it wouldn't have to be quite as close as it would need to be if you were walking around doing errands, for example.
Okay. And during the day when you are sort of out in the wild, so to speak, how close does the phone need to be to you?
About 5 feet from your mouth is what we're recommending.
Okay. So you could put it in your pocket.
Yeah, your back pocket
might
muffle it in a way. Front shirt pocket, probably fine. We're still sorting some of this stuff out.
Okay. All right. So hang on one second. Can it distinguish coughing from snoring?
Yes.
Okay. That came up twice just now. That's a good question. Somebody's asking, what is the most effective way to stop a cough? And I don't think there's a good answer for that. I think it really depends on what's causing your cough, and there are various treatments for it. And that's something that you should probably talk to your doctor about. Somebody had been asking before, what can I say to people to explain my cough? We have a few things dropped into the Q&A here. Somebody said, I was coughing before coughing was cool. That definitely,
I like that.
That means you guys are trendsetters. You are. You were. Here's another question that just popped in. Can differentiate from sneezing? Somebody's just asked, can it differentiate from sneezing?
Yes.
Probably, if it can, yeah. Somebody else said they have an explanation, like I have a chronic cough and I'm vaccinated and boosted. So if they're on a plane ride, they tell the person next to them before they even take off. That's fair. That's good. Answer to how I address my cough. I'm not contagious. I have a genetic condition called PCD. My cilia don't work to move mucus out of the airways, so I have to manually do it by coughing. Yeah, that's a very clear and concise answer. Well, we've actually hit the end of the Q&A. I'd like to remind everybody, if you want to be a panelist, email me at amy@ntminfo.org. I will pass your information along to Hyfe. Gentlemen, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much. It's been very interesting. If any of you would like to, participate in some science from your sofa, this seems like a great way to do it. It'll help give them more data points and make this app better and more useful. So I strongly encourage you to look into it. Oh, can the app help with an irritable larynx? The larynx is that vocal related?
Yeah, I don't know if irritable larynxes can cause coughing, and as a measure of coughing that could be helpful, but I'm not sure I would say it could specifically help with that mechanism.
Yeah. Okay, well, listen, everybody, that's it. We have reached the end of the Q&A. Thank you so much, Reid and Peter. We really appreciate you taking the time. Everyone have a wonderful week. We will see you in a couple of weeks at our next webinar. Have a good one, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.